All right, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started with our session. I'm so glad you're all able to make it. We're going to be talking about prompting and working to get better results with our AI tools. As a quick note, we are recording today's session. However, if you have any questions working with that link after the meeting, we're going to share out the recording and the slides after the session because sometimes those links don't work after the session completes or you have trouble getting to the chat. My name is Jillian Boltz, and I'm a learning strategist manager on the Evolve 365 team with Planet Technologies. I've had the privilege of helping many successful organizations roll out Copilot successfully, and I know how overwhelming it can feel to learn a whole new workflow. So, our goal today is to simplify the process, give you some real examples you can start using right away to save real time in your busy days. We have a great group of people here from Planet as well to help answer your questions in the chat, so please feel free to ask questions as they come up. I have loved this journey of getting to explore and experiment with Copilot, and I've learned a lot. While everything surrounding this tool is developed to be easily accessible, we can just use regular speech patterns to begin. And don't be tempted to think it means that there is no learning curve because using generative AI is completely new for most of us. So, the personal experience, I say, just be patient with the process. Don't be afraid to explore when you can. And be aware that it is a journey that you're going to go on. You're going to start at one place and you'll end up at another place. On our agenda today, we're going to talk about how AI prompting fundamentals play with this situation. And then we'll talk about prompting components, prompting approaches and styles, and then we'll get into some exercises and actually go through prompting together and some AI tool response variations as well. And then we'll round out our session with some tips and tricks for better prompting. Before we go anywhere, we need to talk about some AI safety topics. AI is very much a buzzword right now, and the generative tools coming onto the market are incredibly popular. They're allowing us to do things like summarize lengthy documents, create new and professional content for our teams or for our customers, for our support groups, and they help us with almost every step of our existing workflows. These tools can provide assistance, insights, and help with rephrasing and recreating content. But I do want to emphasize how important it is that we use approved AI services at work because of how many of these generative AI tools function and how they expand their knowledge. There's a real risk of unintentionally exposing personal or confidential data if we don't take things carefully. The good news is that Copilot is going to be based on your work credentials. It's connected to your work account. It helps ensure your data stays secure and it implies the same enterprise grade data protection or organization wide enterprise protections that you're already using with your other Microsoft applications. So even though there's a bunch of AI tools out there online, they don't all protect your company's data. When you use Copilot with your work account, everything is built in automatically immediately. This means your data stays inside your organization and it is not used to train AI models. So that's our be safe with AI information for you. And then before we dive deeper, we want to make sure that you have some information to help you understand your environment. Because you're in an educational space, most likely you're in this commercial world. So we get latest cutting edge technology coming to our environment. This is the same for the private sector, higher education, most non-regulated organizations, and it's the most common cloud to be in. but there are government agencies or contractors that will have some differences in their environments due to specific security requirements. So again, today we're going to focus on enterprise and commercial experiences, and just wanted to call out that that is going to be the one that gets the latest and the greatest. When it comes to government, there could be some additional restrictions there. And Copilot sits inside your Microsoft trust boundary, so that's why this information is important. It already protects your files, emails, Teams chats, SharePoint sites, and Copilot's just adding into that environment. It's not a separate mystery system. It's not layered on top of security and compliance controls, so your organization already has everything it needs in place to operate it. But I'd love to know, how do you typically prompt with AI today? Feel free to drop a number in the chat to let us know which group you fall into. And then this is a safe space, and nobody's judging. We just want to know if you're not sure what a prompt is. That'd be number one. Or maybe you usually use the suggested prompts that are already on the screen where you click on a suggestion, or whether you're making your own, or whether you like both the suggested and your own. And then if you're crafting like a pro already and you have a lot of great suggestions and prompts that you've saved that you're using. Great. I see some numbers coming in. We're falling in the middle range here, which is great. I definitely think you're going to get a lot out of today's session. If you fall on the lower end, you'll still learn a lot today, as well as the upper end, because everybody comes at the prompting experience a little differently. So we're going to hopefully give you some new tools for your tool belt, even if you are crafting like a pro today. When it comes to understanding AI prompts, a prompt is really a set of instructions given to our AI to guide its response. It's like giving instructions to a helpful assistant or giving a job description to a new hire. The clearer and more specific your prompt is, the better the AI can understand and respond with useful information. AI models function as advanced predictive text, aiming to generate the most likely continuation based on your input. Therefore, clear, detailed prompts are going to yield better results. For example, a simple summarize this article prompt versus a specific context rich prompt is going to produce a very different output. So prompting matters, and it's not AI magic. It's definitely not that it can read our minds. If we give it short or vague prompts, it fills in the blanks on its own. Sometimes that works, but most of the time it's not so great. These prompting skills help you give AI what it needs so your results come out closer to what you actually want. We ask AI only sees the words that you type. So everything you put in that prompt box is what it's using for its output. Anything that goes in vague is going to come out vague, or there's going to be assumptions applied. If it gives you a specific response and you only gave it a vague ask, its specificness is going to be based on assumptions. Those could be right and they might not be. The better our prompts equals better results. It's also a faster process, a smoother, more seamless experience. When you ask Copilot to do something, you get what you're looking for without a lot of time spent going back and forth. We want to introduce some core principles of prompting. These are the effective ways. Think of them, what to do before you even start writing. Effective prompting usually starts with the clarity. Be specific in your instructions. Provide context by sharing relevant background information so AI understands your goals. You can set constraints to define boundaries and desired format. And iteration is going to be key. You can refine your prompts based on the results and use a think it through approach back and forth with the AI to explain its reasoning step by step, refine its approach based on how you want to see it done. It's important to understand that all AI tools have some limitations to them, and it starts with the hallucinations. This is where they can generate fabricated or incorrect information and present it as facts. Unlike search engines, AI models do not retrieve verified data but use pattern matching to generate responses. It's important to critically evaluate all of your AI outputs as they may sound convincing yet be inaccurate. You have a great way to fact check your information with Copilot. It comes built in with the ability to quickly see source information and identify any credibility of the information presented. But of course, you can always cross reference the claims with trusted independent resources. And finally, you can analyze your content for potential bias and ensure a balanced, accurate evaluation. If the AI cites a safety standard, like the ISO 27001, verify it against official documentation. And when you check your source credibility, what you're doing is you're reviewing whether the AI cited credible official sources. You can look for references to specific sites. Maybe there's an official site or a standards or industry standard site or an official organization. You can go out to their site, or you can also tell the AI that that is the official source and that's where it needs to cite its information from. And then, of course, we can also validate with factual accuracy. So, by going in and checking some key facts and figures or cross checking dates and statistics, we can really know whether the information being presented is able to be used for our own needs. You want to use internal documentation or official sites, of course, to work through that process. You can also start with a compliance focused prompt. For example, you could ask Copilot to verify this response against the latest HIPAA guidelines and then attach a document if available, or attach a URL if there's a specific site where that is covered. And then you can also encourage citation in your results and say, list all of the different citations where you can find this information and recommend which ones or rank the best ones for credibility. But let's go ahead and take a look at Copilot in action. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a Microsoft Copilot screen here. And you can get to Copilot in a couple of different ways. I've gone to office.com in a browser, and that's a very easy way to get there. It'll change your URL, but it's built with my account in mind. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And what I want to show you, a couple of things that are happening on my screen, is in the bottom corner, I can see that I'm logged in. I've got my name here and I can see my information. That's important. That lets me know I'm logged in. I'm not using this as an external resource as associated with my work account. You can also click on this to see more details. I can also come up to the upper right hand corner and see that I've got this Enterprise Data Protection Shield. This harkens back to that earlier slide, letting me know that everything that I'm talking about in this conversation is private to me and Copilot. It's not training the model. It's not sending that information out beyond our conversation to be used for any other purposes. It's using the information it already has access to, plus what I add into the chat box to respond. But I'd like to do a nice icebreaker prompt. If you could, at this time, enter a place in the chat that you would like to visit, any place, whether you've wanted to go there or it's a place that you've gone to and you'd love to go back to. Just enter a place into the chat that you would love to go to. It can even be a made up place, doesn't have to be real. We just want to go through a process here to see what Copilot can do with some of this information. All right. Thank you for that. Those are some great examples. Feel free to keep entering if you're in the middle of typing. All right. So what I want to do is I want to ask Copilot to give me a 3-day weekend travel plan for a place. And of course, you could do this on your side as well. I'm going to go ahead and drop in the chat the prompt that I'm using here. And in the placeholder there for the place, you can add any place that you would like to go to. And again, you can even use fictitious places just to see what Copilot would do with this type of prompt. But this is a light, nice, fun one I like to do. It's summer, we're doing a lot of traveling and getting out there. This can help me plan a nice 3-day long itinerary for New Zealand. This is a pretty vague prompt though. I haven't really told Copilot any specific details about when I want to go, what I want to do when I'm there, and what I'm interested in. So I could redo this prompt and get a different response with a little bit of engineering on this text here, just to show you what we ended up here with before we move screens. I've got a nice weekend plan and they're basing it out of Queenstown. So easy airport access with lots to do from there. There's nature, adventure, scenic views, food, and wine, and then there's getting around with a rental car or guided tours. And then it breaks it down by day, what we're going to do in the morning, afternoon for dinner, and so forth. And again, it's pretty vague. If I were to just jump into this travel plan right now, there would be a lot of figuring out I'd still need to do to actually uh, make this all happen. It's just a nice high level detail. So I'm going to start a new chat by clicking on the new chat button up here in the corner. That previous conversation, by the way, is still hanging out here in my history. I can jump back into it and look at it again. But this allows me to start over. And this time I want to kind of change that prompt around a little bit. And I want to make it a little bit more vague. Instead of just a 3-day weekend travel plan, I'm going to tell Copilot a little bit more about what I'm trying to do or what I'm interested in. So in this case, I'm looking for a good time of year to go when there's mild weather, a mix of food and outdoor activities. I have a moderate budget, and I want a day by day itinerary, which we kind of had before, but I want to make sure it's nice and simple there and that it didn't take that part out. So here, Copilot has taken that same thought process, but with a little bit more information, what is it able to return for us? So again, it's changing my base a little bit. Instead of it just being Queenstown, it's including Arrowtown. It's giving me some details about when is a good time to go. And then it's also adding some budget level information. So important for those that are watching the budget there and need to make sure that they can fit everything in that they want to do. And then again, it does give me the breakdown of day by day, and that's helpful. Just scrolling down, I want to see what it has here at the bottom. It has some budget tips, which is nice. And then it also talks about some of the pieces that it built into the itinerary based on what I like to do and that additional detail that I provided in my prompt. So with a little bit more context, Copilot is going to give us more information back. So a lot like us humans, if we don't know something, we're not necessarily going to answer it well when asked about it. This travel plan is actually a really good example of what Copilot is able to do based on the options. It's going to go out and pull average information and typical stuff. But the more source information I go through and look at, I can really kind of build this out. Now, if I also, for example, added in maybe say lodging details, Copilot's going to give me some information based on the World Wide Web, what it can find for lodging details, but it's not necessarily going to be based on exact information. So of course you would reference any citations that Copilot pulled back and check those for accuracy by going to that lodging site or contacting them and saying, what's your actual nightly rate for this time of year? All right. So for this next example, I want to head back to our deck and talk a little bit more about what we were doing in that scenario. I called it context engineering or prompt engineering. It's where you go in and you add more information into your prompt so that you're engineering a better outcome. It's just another way of saying extreme prompt writing, and it means giving AI that background so that it can do a good job. It doesn't know your style, your goals, or your situation unless you tell it. When we give it clear context, it's like handling a coworker everything they need instead of expecting them to guess. This avoids those generic answers and helps AI sound more like you. And this technique is highlighted as a foundational skill because it helps fix the problem where AI should know what I mean and when it actually doesn't. And then the other reason we want you to be aware of context engineering is it helps with that limitation that AI can't infer specific expectations or it's not meeting your expectations. And this is similar to how we work with regular day to day interactions with other individuals. Instead of a magical black box, we give it specific instructions and then we can take that information back and use that for our own needs. So, how do we bring this all together? Well, we can make requests, revisit, and readjust our prompts in a conversation as we've observed, but we can also be more effective with a simple prompt at the beginning. And here are some parts that you can add to all of your prompts if you'd like. And again, these are suggestions to help get you a better response. But this first one is persona. And this is where we give Copilot a role relative to the prompt. So, what is its role and what is it supposed to do with this request? So, this allows Copilot to gain understanding regarding the perspective on the topic or intended output. Then we can give it the task, what it's actually supposed to do, and we'll give it as much detail as needed. It's essentially our goal. Then we add what we want this to be turned out as. How do we want to see our response returned? Do you want an essay, a list, a report, a table, a file? There's lots of different outcomes you could be expecting from your prompt. And this is where you give it specific detail about that look of that item. Then we tell it what we're using this information for. Are you giving it to another group of people or is this for your own personal use? This is going to help Copilot tailor how that output is designed. So for example, if you're talking to the general public, you're not going to be using jargon, you're not going to be using complex words, you're going to be using something that's easy to understand. If you're talking with fellow colleagues and experts, you can take some shortcuts on terminology because you all already know what we're talking about. So that's going to frame how Copilot's going to respond. And then the last element we have here is our tone. Our tone is in the messaging and between the lines. And this is really where AI needs some assistance. It doesn't always know the right approach to put on things. Should it be formal or informal? Should it be humorous or should it be serious? And this information just helps Copilot know what the type of output should be based on the situation or context. And so when you combine all of these elements together into a single prompt, you're giving a blueprint over to Copilot and you're getting an optimal output. We discover the opportunity to adjust and seek additional details as we move the conversation forward, but we jump forward through a lot of the pieces that take a minute to identify for a Copilot all in one single prompt. These elements are essentially the same, but it's a different framework for efficient and succinct prompts. So you can use this as well or in addition to. When it comes to the goal, you're specifying what your intended objective is, the context, all the details around your audience and your goal that are needed, the background, if you will, why we're doing this. The source. This is where information can be coming from. So when we source information in our prompts, we can tell Copilot to go to a link and give it a link. You can attach a file, or you can give it some information about what you're looking for. Maybe I'm looking for these types of sites or these types of information. And then the expectation is what we would like Copilot to do. And again, that has a lot to do with the format, what you're expecting your format to be or the tone, but it can be a lot of other things as well. So if we were to take those frameworks and put them all into a single prompt, here's what you might see with like an ad libs style format here. And of course, you could interchange the details. You don't have to put them in any specific order, or you can, like as we said, interplay these frameworks a little bit. But this is a really great way to kind of stay on point and formulate some organized and complete prompts when you're getting started. So think like a persona. Create a task formatted in a certain way to be read by a specific group and use a specific tone or style. And again, you can supply words just like we've done here, or you can even attach files. For the tone and style, oftentimes I like to show what I've done before. The same for format. Maybe I have an existing example of I did this 2 weeks ago. Now I'm doing it for a new group or for a new purpose, but it looks and feels the same as before. So I can attach those as examples or explain them. We also have a lot of different ways that we can go about prompting and working through our Copilot requests. We're responsible to initiate the conversation with Copilot, but Copilot is eagerly waiting for that engagement, and some of these different approaches may be better suited for when the conversation is about a specific topic, or once the conversation is underway, we might want to switch approaches. And there's definitely no right or wrong approach to take with Copilot, and depending on your situation or objective, we'll find some of these are better suited to achieve our intended outcome. But we'll go ahead and dive into some of these different conversation or prompting approaches that we can take with Copilot. But remember, there's no wrong way, just different ways to approach the task at hand. The one example I want to take you through is chain of thought, and this is asking AI to explain its steps before giving the final answer. This doesn't mean the AI is thinking like a human, but it does mean it writes out its reasoning in words. And seeing these steps help you understand the how the answer was crafted or created and lets you catch any mistakes earlier in the process. It also improves the final response because the AI takes a more careful step-by-step approach instead of jumping to a quick guess. This is also especially useful for complicated or high stakes work. By explaining its reasoning first, the AI is forced to bake that reasoning into the final answer, which usually makes the output clearer, more accurate, and more reliable. And this really works because it helps leverage AI's predictive nature. Large language models generate responses by predicting the next word. When you ask for a thought process first, the AI integrates that reasoning into its subsequent word predictions for the actual answer. And it improves the output quality. This forces the AI to bake in internal considerations about the task into its response, leading to more coherent, thoughtful, accurate, and transparent outputs. And of course, that enhanced transparency allows for more easier debugging. If at any point in time the AI has put out something that you don't agree with or that you want to change in some way, you know exactly which element you're going to be starting with or the elements that you're going to be starting with because you've seen those step processes. We also have a prompt approach here that is the few shot prompting. So, as we will discover, AI tools work by predicting the next word, not by understanding your goal or reading your mind. And then, because of this, it's very good at copying patterns like the writing style and the tone. When you give AI a clear example of the style, the format, and the tone, those examples become its strongest guide. It uses them to shape its response so it looks more like what you want. So with few shot prompting, we're giving examples of clear instructions, and the AI is using that information. This helps get rid of the generic or AI missed the mark scenario because there's more context that is provided here in the example. More than I could explain with a couple of words could be attached in an example. So instead of saying be friendly or concise or show you what that looks like, it could also consider giving it a bad example so AI knows what to avoid. And this helps your results come out more consistent with your voice as well. If I'm working on an email, I can ask Copilot to look at an email that I sent before for my own tone to incorporate in there, and it'll leverage imitation and excel at that pattern recognition and provide a good example based on my template that I gave it or the example that I provided it. So it's really great at applying that imitation. It also helps reduce ambiguity because, again, I can't explain everything to AI in a couple of words that could be done with giving it an attachment or giving it an example to follow. And the same is true with bad behavior. When there's something that I want to avoid, there's a lot more nuance to it in the example versus what I might be able to put into text myself. We also have the concept of reverse prompting. This fixes one of AI's biggest problems where it doesn't naturally ask clarifying questions. If you think about your interactions with a colleague and you give them a new task to do that they've never done before, the automatic thing that you do at the end of that task handoff is, let me know if you have any questions. And that person automatically comes back to you when they do have questions throughout that process. This doesn't naturally happen with AI, so we can build it in, where we ask the AI to ask me what you need before you begin. And then the AI is put into a new place to identify the gaps on its own, and then it'll ask questions, and we can change our prompt as we go so that the AI is shifting from acting like just a tool that's accommodating to actually acting like a partner in this process to identify what you need to tell it and then giving it that information. This also helps prevent wrong numbers, missing details, or made up information because, again, Copilot's asking you as you go. It also kind of supports that natural state where AI would like to be that eager intern, but you would rather have it bother you with all these questions than make assumptions. The next approach I wanted to highlight is assigning a role. By assigning a role, AI is able to pull from a huge knowledge base down to a very more and into a much more specified group. And so AI has a lot of information in its knowledge base about what a communications expert has, or what a teacher or an educator's expertise is. And so if I want Copilot to act as a communications expert and draft this communication, it is going to use those communications standards and pull that into its response. And so that can be really helpful. If I'm asking AI to explain a technique or a topic that I am not an expert in, but it could be an expert in for me, maybe an IT expert or a technology expert to explain a complex topic, or a mathematical expert that can explain this mathematical formula to me in a way that I can easily understand. It then takes on the role of that request. And this can be a really big technique to apply to really focus Copilot down to a specific knowledge subset that it has. This triggers deep associations within the knowledge because AI works on patterns and recognition of relevant topics. So when it sees that we're talking about a specific role, it then knows based on the data in the internet that this role does these things. These are going to be some of the standards for that role. And then here is the data set that goes along with that and how they operate. And it applies constrained thinking. By adopting that role, AI is forced to apply the principles and the mindsets associated with that role. And it can also enhance the output specificity. Instead of generic responses, it gives it a particular lens and more nuanced expert like answers. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these techniques together. I'm going to pull up my demo account. And again, if you want to follow along with me, I would love for you to do so. I'll be dropping in some of my example chats into the prompt so you can, or into the chat so that you can take those with you and you can also try them out. So for this first example, I do want to start a new chat. And what I want to do is I want to ask Copilot to help me draft an email. Now you can open up Outlook and access Copilot in Outlook and have it draft right there. That's a very strong use case. It doesn't matter necessarily in this case where I start. So I'm going to start here where I'm already at. But you can absolutely just stay in the tool you're in. If you're working on emails in your inbox, then don't switch screens. Just open up Copilot in Outlook. It's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. But what I'm going to ask Copilot to do is help me with that zero-shot approach where I provide AI with a task without any prior examples, no details regarding objectives, audience, or voices or anything like that. I'm just going to see what the model relies on from its own data to infer what to do with this request. And again, it's going to be drafting an email where I'm announcing a new project management tool that we're going to roll out, and we want to implement it next month. It's Microsoft Planner. We want to highlight the benefits of this tool and provide a brief overview of the training sessions that will be available to our team. So again, with this, I'm giving Copilot as much information here as I am, but there could be a lot more that I give it. In this case, I'm just giving it the task without a lot of examples to see what it can do. In this example, again, Copilot is going to rely on information it can find. Now, Microsoft Planner is a tool that you can go out and find tons of information on the World Wide Web, so it's able to look all that stuff up. And then from the rest of the information, it's understanding some elements here. So team, it's giving me a subject line because we're talking about an email. So it's inferring different details from my prompt and going through and applying that to its response here. And so what it's doing is it's letting you know what's coming, what's the training and support around this, and again, it's got some email elements in there as well. So this can be a great way to get started where you don't give Copilot a lot of information, so you don't absolutely have to do that. But if we wanted to give it more information to see how that changes our output, we absolutely can. So to try this in a different light, I'm going to click on new chat here. And this time I'm going to give it a little bit more of an in-depth prompt. And this is the one-shot approach where I give it all of this information up front, including an example. The model can then use that information in the example to better infer the task and apply the learned pattern with new similar prompts. So what we're doing here is, again, we're drafting an email about the same tool implemented next month, the brief overview. And then I added a piece, do not include any emojis. Oftentimes Copilot does that. And depending on your approach that you're taking, you might not want that. And then I'm giving an example. I'm telling it, here's what I want in my subject line. There's placeholders in here. It can insert the topic and the date or the call to action, but it needs to have all of that in the subject line. And then for the body of the email, here's the layout. I want to follow. And again, I'm including placeholders. I'm going to allow it to populate what goes in those placeholders when it generates my email, but it's getting that structure of what I'm looking for. I'm going to have an announcement here about what's going on. Then I'm going to have the details. I'm going to include why it matters and next steps, and then what to do if you have any questions. And then I'll get into the bottom of the message. So again, prompting with Copilot to give it this example of what to follow, gives it this model to apply to its response here. And it's going to be more on target, right? Because I already know that I want it to look like this. I just need help populating some of those placeholders based on this ask that I'm working on. But this also gives me a template that I can follow. So I'm going to drop this into the chat. And again, your email could be totally different on a totally different topic. But again, what I'm doing is I'm giving it a template to follow, and I'm putting in placeholders where the placeholders go and asking it to potentially repeat this process time and again for different types of emails. And I can get a very consistent output every time because what we're getting here is that subject line, and then we're getting the body. And then where it populated the different elements are going to be based on the details that I gave it, right? And I can add in more details for any of these placeholders as well by giving it a specific detail. If there's a specific date next month, for example, or I could say, you know what, instead of launching like that, we could just say launching in July. But there are ways that you can then tailor that output so that it's more consistent and it's based on a template. And then, of course, you can reuse that in the future. Okay. So now that we've seen the zero shot and the one shot, the next approach I want to talk about, we didn't have a slide on this, but it was indicated on the one slide that had a bunch of approaches. And this is meta prompting. And this is very similar to asking Copilot questions to help you generate better prompts. So the practice of writing better prompts with the use of your AI tools. So for example, let's say I'm looking at the ability to be able to summarize long documents. I've got a lot of long documents I need to evaluate, and I do this all the time. I'm always asking Copilot to summarize these, but I want to do it more effectively. So what are some prompt ideas that Copilot can supply? Oh, bear with me. I put in the wrong thing there. So I'm going to ask Copilot to give me 5 prompt ideas to help me summarize long documents more effectively. And with this prompt, Copilot is helping me write my own prompts. It's giving me 5 in the place of 1, so this is also a really great way of prompting with Copilot when you are brainstorming or you're thinking about a different approach to take with something. Ask for more than 1. That way you don't have just one response. You have essentially 5 for the price of 1 or 5 for the amount of time as 1. So in this case, Copilot's giving me a structured executive summary prompt. And then it's also giving me an audience specific prompt. And these little boxes allow for easier copying and pasting without formatting. So it makes it very easy for you to copy and paste this information out of this window and put it somewhere else. But then you can see that it goes into a few more examples here, but it's given me 5 different ways to go about summarizing long documents more effectively, depending on what my ultimate goal might be. Is it action oriented? Is it based on my audience? Is it a section breakdown? There's different ways I might want to approach that, but now I've got 5 killer prompts that I can use when I want to summarize long documents, and it could be a very easy way for me to reiterate that process. Another example of using meta prompting is to ask Copilot for assistance on something that you haven't accomplished yet. So, for example, maybe I'm heading into a difficult conversation. We have these all the time. And unfortunately, when you're preparing for those, it's a little hard. You have an idea of what topics might come up in this conversation, but I'm curious to see how AI can help with a common problem of preparing for a difficult conversation. So in this case, Copilot is going to give me some different ways that I can get started using AI for conversation prep. And at first, it's going to start with a prompt. So we can submit a prompt to Copilot and say, I'm preparing for a conversation with whom? Is that a person, a role, an audience? And what is the topic of our conversation? Tell Copilot what the goal or the desired outcome is, and then I can ask for what do I need to cover, questions I should ask, possible reactions they might have, and then suggested responses. And then again, it goes into some other ways that you could go into coaching style prompts that are more in depth here. Work conflicts, parent talk, etc., script and tone control, help me when wording really matters, and help me come up with some scripts. You can also do role play practice, which is great for nervous situations. Ask Copilot to be the other person, and then we'll respond to things that they're doing. You can have Copilot play devil's advocate. It could be highly critical. It could be highly dismissive, and those difficult personalities that you might be trying to support. And so you can ask Copilot to be all of these different things and then respond to what you're going to broach in your conversation and see what it does. And then you can feel that you have practiced and role played for this example, feel more prepared heading into it. Now, I have quite a few different examples that you can use for meta prompting, but I think you get the point here. You're basically asking Copilot to suggest ways to approach something, and then you're evaluating what it says to see what works best for your situation. The next example I wanted to talk about is going to be chain of thought. Chain of thought is, again, when we ask AI to detail its thought process step by step, show its work. It requires AI to provide all the steps it followed to arrive at its solution, and it helps us ensure accurate results. Really important when the technique matters, or when the process matters, not just the outcome, but the means to the outcome. So this technique involves breaking down a problem into smaller, more manageable steps, and therefore when you get your output, you can reason through each step logically and determine if this was the right approach or if I need to swap something out. So for this prompt, I'm going to ask Copilot to go through a series of steps, and then I'm going to give it what those steps are. So in this case, we are going to analyze some attached student results, and that data has multiple classes, and we're going to complete the following steps. Step 1, identify overall trends. And then how do you do that? You calculate and estimate averages, you compare performance, you describe patterns. Then you go into step 2, and then you go into step 3. And then we have some requirements at the end. We need clear headings for each step so we know when they changed. We need to show reasoning explicitly in each section. We need evidence from the data set to support the claims. And we need to finish with a concise key takeaways summary so that I have something nice and short at the end there. For this prompt to work, I need to give it data, right? Because in this case, I told it I have attached data and I have not done that yet. So you can do that in a couple of ways. You can drag and drop into this box. So if you have another window open where you can see the file and its location, just drag and drop into this box. You can also hit the plus sign and search for documents and attach them that way. The other thing you can do is you can use your slash key. The slash key is the one right under the question mark, and when I click on that, it allows me to use a keyword search to look up files that I have access to. Usually the most recent ones are the easiest to see in that pop-up box. But what I'm looking for is not showing up on my screen, so we're not going to do that approach because it's not loading correctly. And it's also because I zoomed in a lot just to make it easier for us to all see here. But we'll just go ahead and add work content here. Bear with me. I'll zoom out a moment, and I think that'll help me. We'll add our work content, and we'll get those first semester results in there because that's what we're evaluating was our first semester results. And now we'll see how Copilot is able to analyze this information. It did drop my file mid-prompt, which was not what I intended to do, but you'll see that oftentimes that has no bearing on Copilot's understanding of what's going on here, because when I referenced the attachment, it was up here, so it'll still be able to kind of suss out what I was trying to do and kind of look over my little typo there. But what it's going to do is it's going to take a moment. This is not the quickest prompt response from Copilot that you can generate, because what it's doing is it's not only giving you the results, but it's telling you how it came about, each one of them. And in this case, it has a multi-step process it's going through to first identify trends. So here it's telling us here are your averages, the comparison of the performance types, the observed patterns. It's also citing my file and where it's getting that information from. And it's really breaking down that step 1. And my step 1 involved calculating the averages, comparing the different values, and then also describing patterns that it noticed across the different categories. So it's definitely doing that. And then it goes into step 2 to compare those categories of performance and identify gaps and explain what those gaps suggest. So here we can see that it's got some gaps and then what those suggestions might be. And then step 3 is where it identifies those at-risk situations. It's defining the criteria for concern, determining what meets that criteria, and describing common characteristics. Again, all the pieces that I told it to do. And then in the end, I told it I needed clear headings for each step, which it did. Show the reasoning explicitly in each section, which it did. The evidence from the data set, which it also did. You can see here there's an example pattern where it's pulling out specific numbers from my data set. And at the end, we've got this nice key takeaways summary. So it's really honing in on all of those different processes to really give me a defined result. All right. So the last example I wanted to get into is going to be that role-based example where we give Copilot a specific job. So I'm going to start a new chat, and this time I'm going to ask Copilot to act as a special education specialist. Now, of course, this could be the role that you sit in. This could be a role that you want to get expertise from. So it can be a lot of different things. In this case, I'm asking it to act as a role that I'm familiar with expertise in areas that I also have expertise in, but I want it to adopt something like I would. And so that's why I pull those items in. And what I want it to do is use a compassionate, student-centered tone and ensure recommendations and accessibly and legally sound, provide strategies to support students with specific needs for their IEPs, including accommodations, modifications, progress monitoring, ideas. So a very detailed prompt, grounded specifically in what I'm trying to generate here. So in this example, Copilot now knows, okay, we are talking about all the special education areas out there when it comes to inclusive practices and IEP development. So it's whittling down its knowledge base to just that knowledge area. And then from that, it's going to use that knowledge to help build out this comprehensive student-centered guide that you can use to support your students. So it's jump starting the process by saying, okay, forget all the things you know out there on the World Wide Web about all the things you can do and really hone in on what's most important for this type of scenario with this specific role in mind. So just to scroll through this example here, Copilot again is using information that is going to be based upon information that's out there and the role that I gave it, and then of course the detail that I asked for in its response as well. So just scrolling through here, it's hitting all of the major areas, and then we've got the universal stuff here at the bottom, IEP alignment and legal considerations, progress monitoring, and then a final thought here. And then, of course, in true Copilot fashion, we have some suggestions on how we can drill deeper. But as you can see, I didn't have to explain to it what certain concepts were. I just called them out as relevant to our conversation. So now it knows, okay, this is where you're headed with this because you gave me all this context around the role and the desired outcome there so that I can then pull in those strategies and ideas and solutions based on that information. All right, let's head back to the deck and wrap up with a couple more exercises that I have here for you where you can compare a good prompt versus a not so good prompt. And this exercise really helps you identify where we might start, typically the first idea that comes off the top of our head for our prompt, and then how we could spend a couple of moments, build it out, and get a lot better response out of Copilot because we started with a stronger prompt versus a vague one. So for this first prompt, imagine we're creating a syllabus and we want to do it from a document. This prompt isn't so strong. Feel free to add to the chat what you would add to this type of prompt to make it a little bit more robust. What I might do is identify what I've got here. I've got the task and I've got the source. There's a document and there's a syllabus. Great. But I could add in the persona, the format, the audience, the tone, and the context. That's going to build out this prompt to something maybe more like this. Create a syllabus using the attached document for a more advanced audience. Include brief course description, learning objectives, week by week outline, and a suggested activity. Format the syllabus with headings and bullet points. So again, taking a very simple prompt and adding in the different elements for task, audience, tone, complexity, expectations, and format is going to give you a lot stronger of a prompt and a lot better of a response from Copilot. Just taking this example one step further, again, starting with a very vague prompt, reply to this email. Think about what you might add to improve this prompt. Right now we have the task. You're going to generate an email and the source is going to be the original email that we're responding to. So there's some information in there, but it doesn't have any of our personal details in there. So we could add in what our expectations are, what our role or persona is, who our audience is. It might be able to see the name of the person on the email, but it might not know what their intent is or what their role is. And then you can also add in that tone and complexity as well. So building that out, this might be a different way to write that same exact prompt. Reply to the student email and summarize common strengths and areas for improvement. Use an encouraging, growth-focused tone. Include one specific example of strong work and two clear next steps the student can take before their next assignment. So again, I think you can see the difference between the two prompts. Spending a little bit of time to build out your prompts is a great exercise to ensure that you're getting an elevated, better response out of Copilot. So here are some tips and tricks you can try out today. Add these little addendums to the bottom of your prompts. The first one being, ask me 5 questions that will improve your response. This will allow Copilot to ask you 5 questions before it even responds. It'll say, okay, I'd like to know these 5 questions. And then you respond to as many of them as you want. You don't have to respond to all of them, but it allows you to know where there might be some vague or ambiguous parts of your prompt that you could then build out. The next example, give me 2 options. Again, give me 5 options, give me 10 options, depending on what you're looking for. This is going to give you more than just one response. There's often going to be different formats, different approaches applied, and oftentimes you're going to see something you hadn't thought of. So this allows you to get more creative with your interactions with Copilot, getting more responses for a single prompt. Show your work, again, builds upon that thought process that LLMs can tell you how they determine things so that you can determine if they're going about it the right way and adjust and quality check where needed. Another great example, if I'm working on a document, I can have Copilot create an FAQ at the end of the document. What that does is it highlights what people would ask when reading this document. They're going to ask this question or that question. I can then go in and address those questions more succinctly in my document so that you don't need an FAQ at the end. It covers all of the FAQs that people have. Or it could be used in supporting that document if it is a long document. Here's some more tips. Help me create a prompt for an LLM. You can have AI help you create prompts for AI. Tell it what you're trying to accomplish and work through those different prompt examples before actually starting your prompt. Ask clarifying questions. It's more flexible than the ask me 5 questions that we showed on the previous slide. It just allows it to ask clarifying questions throughout the process, and you can, of course, be as flexible with your responses as possible. You don't have to respond to every question it gives you. You can just tell it how to handle certain scenarios. And then anytime you get frustrated with Copilot maybe not hitting the mark on an output and you're asking it to do something, try breaking that task down into smaller tasks. Oftentimes when it does step one, I can be able to review and approve step one before moving into step two. If I need to rework step one before it derails step two, I'm involved in that iteration process. So this can help you kind of break down that process if you are having some issues with quality. So in conclusion, we've equipped you with some comprehensive tools to help with working with AI, their practical applications, responsible use, and ways that you can enhance your productivity while working with AI. As we work within these guidelines and our organizations, please embrace new technologies and experiment away. We are happy to support your Copilot experience from rollout to long-term adoption. We help teams embed Copilot into everyday work. If your organization is looking for help rolling out Copilot or gaining long-term meaningful adoption, get in touch with us today, and we have our information here on the slide. But I also do have a poll that I'd love to throw in if you have a chance before leaving. We just want to see if today's session met your expectations. If there's anything that we could improve, we would love to get a gauge on that. I want to thank you all so much for coming. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. Otherwise, you are free to go respond to the poll. We'd love to see you at a future session. We will be sharing the recording and the slides out after today's session as well, so no need to worry about that. Thank you all so much for attending. I hope you have a wonderful day.